All right, we'll get started. I think we're recording. Let me just double check that. Yep, I think we are recording. All right, well, sorry. Welcome everybody to the Journey Builder Bootcamp. This is our last session on the Journey Builder Bootcamp. It has been such an amazing journey. This topic wasn't really actually even on the agenda, but we've been sort of diving in to Privacy Center and the consent model, and just thought it was really current and a great topic to discuss today. So thank you for joining. And so today, yeah, we're going to be going through and understanding a little bit more of a simplistic view of the consent model. It's a very complex model in the Salesforce CRM environment. You can do a lot with it. And how that is getting populated and leveraged using the Salesforce Privacy Center platform, which is a very cool platform. And then, of course, how we're going to integrate that in with Marketing Cloud to have that consent model or Privacy Center become the database of record for subscriber preferences, and how to drive those marketing communications in Marketing Cloud through Journey Builder. So let's talk about what we're going to be going over today. We're going to give you a use case that we've heard as we're working with clients related to this issue, and a solution that we're going to overview today. We'll give you a quick walk through on the Privacy Center product. And then we'll take a look at the solution flow diagram, how this is all going to work together between Privacy Center, consent model, Marketing Cloud, and all, in full circle. And then we'll be in the platform. So we're going to start in Privacy Center, give a quick tour of that. We're going to walk through creating a simple preference center using their custom preference center tool. Show you a consent record that is on the consent model, how that gets created via Privacy Center. And then we'll be in Marketing Cloud, pulling in that data via those sync data extensions, and leveraging the functionality in Marketing Cloud to pull in the consent data and update the all subscribers database on the email side. And then also using Marketing Cloud to align the two databases so that the database of record will be the consent model in Salesforce and in Privacy Center. And then we'll always end with those 5 tips that we've been doing throughout the session. So let's talk about this use case. So Cervelo Bank is struggling to streamline their consent capture and management for their United States and also international business. They want to stay compliant. They don't want to have any risk from a data privacy standpoint, but they also want to, market to their subscribers. So, we found a lot of companies are doing a lot of great things as far as capturing that consent, utilizing all subscribers in Marketing Cloud for email to understand those different subscribers and how to manage that. But sometimes you'll find those databases might be out of alignment. So, some of the similar problems that we're seeing is that they don't have a clear path to manage that data privacy. They're sort of checking a bunch of boxes, but it's not all, comprehensive. If they're using the Salesforce CRM environment, that's what we're going to be using as our use case today. That environment, and also Marketing Cloud, that all subscribers, just using the email as an example, can be misaligned with, which is going to be the database of record on that. And then if you've explored the consent model, it is kind of complex. There's a lot of objects there. So, you might find that can be challenging to help, use that model to use it as a database of record. So in our solution we're going to walk through today, and again, this is not a full blown out solution. It's sort of a basic solution connecting the dots all throughout. So we're going to want to leverage the power of Privacy Center to, pull in that preferences using their tools, and then populate those consent objects to do a light dive into that consent model. Then we're going to want to sync those objects into Marketing Cloud, And then we also want to do a two-way sync, making sure that all subscribers is being updated from that consent model. And then also we're updating the consent model from all subscribers as well. And let that consent model, sorry, a little typo there, drive those advanced journeys. So we have an example of how you can use journeys to utilize that database of record on the consent model side driven by Privacy Center. So we'll do a quick overview of Privacy Center, definitely worth checking out. We won't go into an incredible amount of detail here, but like the headline says, it's a great tool to simplify your data management. So if you're protecting sensitive data, if you need to delete or retain data, they have a lot of different options there to comply from data privacy regulations. If you're getting requests that you need to either delete or provide the data history for your subscribers, they have a lot of great features and functionality to do that. And then more importantly, our focus that we're going to be working on today is how to streamline that customer consent, feeding it into the consent model. There's a variety of different, very cool use cases. We want to just put up this slide for those to screen capture, to look at all the different areas you can use Privacy Center. We're going to be focusing on that preference management use case where we want to use that custom preference center tool to pull in and manage all of that consent and kick off using the consent model in the Salesforce CRM environment. Okay, let's talk about what we're going to sort of solution today. And we've got the two environments. We've got Salesforce, and that's where Privacy Center sits, and we've got Marketing Cloud. Now, we'll start with the Preference Center cloud page. So we're going to be leveraging the Privacy Center custom Preference Center application, but we're going to embed that into a cloud page so it can just be a little bit more on brand. That's where we're going to be capturing that consent, and that's going to be driving that consent directly into the consent model in Salesforce. Now we're going to be syncing all of those consent objects into Marketing Cloud, and we've got 3 separate automations that are going to be working to leverage that data. The first automation that we're looking to utilize is that we want to sync all subscribers with that consent model in Salesforce CRM. So you might have a subscriber, which in our example, we're going to use a contact. It also could be a lead or other types of subscribers. You might have a subscriber or a contact and all subscribers that might be unsubscribed, but based on their preference management on that preference center, they might opt in for those email communications. And that's where this automation is going to check to see for that contact. We're going to want to compare what is in all subscribers and also compare what is in the consent model and update that accordingly. So that's one automation. A second automation will be driving those journeys. So we're going to be capturing consent on email, on SMS, or on mobile opt-ins, on a variety of different channels and a variety of different communication methods within those channels. So what we want to do is use an automation to populate a master or universal data extension that we can use to query to determine who should be receiving emails in those journeys. So we'll walk through that automation, a very simple automation to making sure that we're leveraging the database of record, which is that consent model, to drive who'd be sending journeys. No longer just using all subscribers from an email standpoint. Ideally, we want to leverage that consent model, which is going to sit in Marketing Cloud and those synchronized data extensions. When that email is sent, if the subscriber opts out, using the unsubscribe link, that's going to drive them to that preference center. It's going to capture that data and capture it in the consent model in Salesforce CRM. And then again, that's going to repopulate, update all subscribers. Instead of it going directly to all subscribers here, we want to use that flow. And then if they opt out in different ways that is not being captured in that preference center, so for instance, if they hit unsubscribe or reply, unsubscribe on the email, that will be captured in all subscribers. So here's another example where we're going to need to use another automation to make sure that if all subscribers is the database of record for that moment, we're going to want to make sure that we update use this automation to update the consent model from all subscribers. Sorry, I was using this automation updates all subscribers. This automation is the one that's using all subscribers to update the consent model. So a bunch of different automations there. The journey part is going to be a little bit more of a different view of that. Instead of using all subscribers or maybe using a campaign-fed journey directly from Salesforce CRM, we're going to be using that consent model to drive, who should be in the journey, and then also using that that consent model to determine the actions within the journey itself. So we'll go through that example. That's just wanted to point out the journey component because this is a Journey Builder Bootcamp. Any questions on how this is all going to be coming together and working before we move on to the next slide? Okay. Please ask any questions at any time. All right, let's talk about the data relationships with this consent model. Take a quick look at a pretty simplified view of the consent model, how it's going to be coming into Marketing Cloud and how it's going to be leveraged across all the different programs, and then how we're going to be using the data from Marketing Cloud to go back and update the consent model. So, most importantly, the consent model is driven by that, that key object in Salesforce, whether that's a contact or a lead. In our example, we're going to use the contact. And if those are familiar with the consent model, familiar with Data Cloud, the individual object is sort of the bridge between the contact or lead and the consent model in Salesforce. So we'll need to use the individual ID there. And then the contact point consent object, that's the object and one of the many different objects that Privacy Center is going to populate when you are capturing the consent, whether it's an email consent, SMS consent. So the link to the individual is this party ID on the consent point, contact point consent object. And then data for use purpose can be used to designate different types of communication, like if you're using marketing, opting in for marketing communication, or say transactional communication, or a different type altogether. So relatively straightforward use case of the consent model. You can blow this out to more than a dozen different objects within Salesforce. It's really, gives you a lot of options there, but just for this use case, we wanted to keep it relatively simple. So in the Marketing Cloud side, how this is all being pulled in. So from the contact, classic, we're going to be pulling in that subscriber key from the contact ID and the email address. In all subscribers, we're going to be using various different data points to update all subscribers based on that consent model. Again, so we're going to want to use that subscriber key that comes from that contact ID and the email address. Not so necessary on all subscribers, but just depends on what you're using for the subscriber cases. We wanted to keep that in there. And then to understand, what the status is, we'll be using the consent status right here, this privacy consent status on the consent model. That's what's going to be using as a comparison to all subscribers to determine how we should be all updating that all subscriber status. And then this contact point ID will also be used when we need to update from all subscribers back to the content point consent model here. So we need to have that ID in there to know which of those consent object models that we're records that we're updating. And then for that universal or master data extension that we're using to drive our journeys, so we're going to want to capture, the subscriber key, the email address, and a variety of different data points that we're going to use to determine whether, if, obviously if they're consented, the channel, whether that's email, SMS, and whatever other communication you're using, and then that send classification might be used from that data purpose to designate different types, whether that's marketing or commercial communication versus transactional communication. And then writing back to the consent model, we're going to be using that privacy consent status. If we need to do the update from all subscribers, we're going to be updating that privacy consent status, and then using the ID for that contact point object record to determine which record to update when we're doing the updates from Marketing Cloud to the consent model. All right, so let's jump into the platform and let's take a quick peek at Privacy Center. So this has, this is the home screen. It gives you all of the different features and functionalities that we sort of covered briefly. But let's just talk about the Preference Center real quick and show you how quickly and easily you can create a Preference Center that you can utilize in your communications. So we're going to go, pretty basic as far as a build. So we're going to select the consent templates. There are a variety of different templates that you can use here. And let me just shrink my screen here. There we go. We'll create a new consent template. For the use case that we created, we're going to use a detailed consent example template. We're going to use a channel, our purpose, which is going to be that marketing related purpose. Again, you could change it to different types of purposes, transactional, AI driven. We're going to edit the channel type. For this example, we're just going to select email. You could also do phone, or primarily email or phone. And then let's just name this. So we'll do JB Bootcamp Post 131, and we'll hit next, and we'll save and activate. So that sets up the basic template. And then if you need to create the form itself, we're going to create a new form. We're going to select that consent template we just created. There it is, already selected for us. This is sort of a preview. It's a pretty basic consent for an example today. We didn't want to go in too much detail, but this is what the screen would look like. We'll show you how it looks like embedded. So we'll just name this again. And for our record details, we'll select email for that as well. And we'll hit save. And I think we can just save and publish. And we'll save as a new version. And that's it. So, I mean, when I go through, there's a variety of different templates. You can create different forms. And then if you click on it once it's published, you can get this embedded code, which you can pass off to your developer and use that in a cloud page. Here's an example of, again, a very basic rendering of that preference center where, if they check this box and they click submit, they are going to be opted in for email communication. So relatively straightforward preference center. There's a lot of depth within this tool to create a variety of different preference centers. You can also host them directly in Privacy Center. You don't need to do it on a cloud page. But just wanted to give a quick walkthrough of how that can be created in Privacy Center. And then let's take a look at, let's go back into Privacy Center and let's take a look at the record that's created in that contact point consent object. So this was a record that we had created for Sandesh yesterday. Clicking on that submit button on that form page. This is that contact point consent. Let's click in here and just take a look at this object. It's got the privacy consent status. It's got the channel type that we're looking for. And then how this is connected, you can either go through the contact point email. It's an object we didn't really include in the schema, but you can also go directly to the individual from that contact point consent, and you can see the individual has the contact and a bunch of more details in this record. So that's the path in Salesforce of how to get how Privacy Center will, utilizing that custom preference center, will populate that record starting in the consent model that you can leverage throughout CRM and then also in Marketing Cloud. So let's take a look now into Marketing Cloud, and again, we are synchronizing in those consent model objects, and we're pulling that into our synchronized data extension. And here is that record for Sandesh. He's opted in for email communication. And so now we have that data in Marketing Cloud along with the individual and obviously the contact as well. So now that we've got that in place, let's take a look at the automation that we would want to build to update all subscribers based on what we're seeing from the consent model. So here's an example of what that would entail. It's your standard ETL model recommended for how to update all subscribers. We'll go through the query in a second here. And then once you've populated that data extension is attached to that three-step process, the data extract, which is extracting that data extension, putting it in a safe house, the file transfer process, which is going to transfer that file so that it can be imported into all subscribers, and then the import activity, which is going to update all subscribers as well. We're going to be kicking off an Automation Studio bootcamp next week, I believe. And one of the sessions is doing a deep dive into this ETL process. So if you're interested in best practices of how to update all subscribers, we're not going to go through that today, but please stay tuned for that session. We've got that earmarked because I think it's an important part to walk through. So, okay, let's take a look at this query. Let me zoom in a little bit and see what it's doing to populate those records that we need. So let's talk about our from statement here first. So we've got our contact synchronized data extension, right? We want to pull in that contact. We're connecting that to the individual object, part of that consent model, because that contact ID, that contact record does have the individual ID, so just joining it there. And then the contact point consent record that we just had Privacy Center create, we're linking that to the individual ID using as a party ID on that consent model, that contact point consent record that allows us to connect to the individual itself. And that which connects it to the contact. And then last but not least, we've got all subscribers here, the unsubscribed. Now, one thing just to note here, sorry, this was sort of in development, working for this proof of concept. Probably you want not a left join there, you want a regular join. We've got this built in a child business unit of our sandbox. You can sort of see our main sandbox business unit is here. We're in a sub business unit here, and so that's why we have the ENT in there. It's even recommended, or I think it's the only way to pull in those synchronized data extension. You need to add that ENT enterprise abbreviation when you're pulling in your synchronized data extensions. Okay, so that's our data model, gets us to that consent record via the contact. And then we also are pulling in all subscribers to do that comparison. And then let's just talk about the select statement. Again, we're just doing something very straightforward as far as the date extension that we're using to update all subscribers. Ideally, all you really need is a subscriber key and then what that status would be. So in this example, we've got a couple other different data points that we're using just to visualize that data to do that comparison. So like seeing the privacy consent status and the all subscriber status is if you're looking to visualize those two statuses to see, hey, before we run this, it'd be good to see those two statuses to see if if they're in alignment. So you don't need these last two fields or the email address. We're just using those for data points. And again, this is just populating the data extension that's being used for the ETL. And then our where clause, it's pretty simple here, and I think we were just using this for our a proof of concept, but this would probably be a little bit more of an example. And this query really needs to be fleshed out with all the different scenarios. But essentially what you're looking to do is you're looking to find where, let's say the privacy consent object has, that person opted out, but in all subscribers, they're still active. So we want to populate a record where those two statuses are not in alignment. And that's what this one example does. And then we'd want to change this to unsubscribe. I think I was just sort of unsubscribing and playing around with this. Sorry, that was a little bit out of order. And so this only really addresses one example. So I think if you used a case statement and a little bit more advanced where clause, you could use this query to cover all of those scenarios. So this covers if it's opted out in the consent model, but active in the all subscribers. You could also be opted out in the consent model, and you could be, held or bounced. You want to use this query to add all the different scenarios, and maybe use a case statement to populate what you're going to be using as that status to be updating all subscribers. You'd also want to use an example where, say, the privacy consent status is opt-in, and that subscriber in all subscribers is unsubscribed. So this just sort of starts you down that path. We didn't want to fully build that out. Didn't want to give away too much there, but that's the basic logic that you want to do. You want to be able to pull in that consent model. You want to be able to compare it against all subscribers and identify those records when they're out of alignment. That's going to populate the data extension that's going to feed the automation to update all subscribers accordingly. Any questions on that automation before we jump to the next automation? Okay. Let's go to our next automation, which is going to be updating all subscribers. Is going to be taking all subscribers data and updating the consent model. So a little bit more of a simpler query here. And let's take a look at the query itself. It's going to be simple, very similar, given like the from statement is going to be exactly the same. The select's going to be slightly different, and the where clause will be very similar logic. So in this example, we've got where if we've got that consent model where they're opted in, but let's say they hit reply on that email address from that journey, and they become unsubscribed in all subscribers. All subscribers at that point, from an email standpoint, is the correct database, the correct subscriber status. So we want to again find out where the two databases are out of alignment and update the consent model, that way. So again, we want to build this where clause with all those different scenarios. Same thing on the select statement. Make sure that we're including maybe with a case statement all the different scenarios. The one thing that's a little bit different on this end is we need to populate the consent object ID because we need to, use that functionality in the next step to identify, okay, what is that consent object record that we're actually updating to its appropriate status. So in this example, if the, say the consent record is opted in, but in all subscribers, it says it's unsubscribed, then we're gonna want that status that we're updating on the consent model in Salesforce. We wanna change that to opt out. Make sure you're clear on your nomenclature because they're gonna be different than all subscribers. We're gonna wanna update that status and we wanna use the ID to do that. So I know in this Journey Builder Bootcamp, we've covered using Journey Builder to update records in Salesforce CRM. So you could obviously use this automation and connect it to a journey that just updates that consent object. But we wanted to give you a different variation of that just because we had covered that before. And so this automation is doing something a little bit different. It's using a script functionality, using SSJS, and using AMP script to do that same functionality. So a different way of approaching this. So this script is very simple. It is just basically calling a content block that is doing that AMP script functionality. And this is an example of that code, that exact content block. So when it runs, it's pulling in that subscriber key. It is, setting in the data extension. It's basically using lookup rows functionality and AMP script to cycle through all of the records that you're looking to populate from that last query. And then it's updating the single Salesforce object, the contact point consent object, with that appropriate status that's being pulled in, populated by that data extension from that prior query. So a different way of doing that updating from Marketing Cloud to Salesforce to that consent model. Again, you can always use Journey Builder to do that as well. I want to give you another option there. You can use AMP script in a script activity there as well. Any questions on part two, this automation of how we are populating the data? Again, the second part of how we're keeping this data aligned in Salesforce Marketing Cloud and the consent model. And let me just go back here and just cover what we had just talked about. So we just covered the automation that is populating and updating all subscribers based on the consent model. And then we just covered the second one, which is the automation and or journey that you can use when all subscribers is the preferred subscriber preference, and then update that consent model using either that script activity or Journey Builder. Okay, so let's talk about the last option, which is transforming a little bit of how you're going to leverage your communication and sending those journeys by populating a universal data extension and then using an automation to feed in those journeys so that you make sure that you're aligned with that with the consent model. So here's here's an automation that is connected to a journey. Let me show you the data extension just for we didn't just for time purposes. We didn't go through in detail how this universal data extension would be populated with all of these records, but just so you can give an example of how this would be created. Or the data that would be in here. So using Sandesh as an example, if we were building out our preference center a little bit more detail, say we're capturing email consent and we're also capturing mobile phone consent as well. We would use an automation to query those consent objects and then populate rows in this date extension that would include some important information. So, the channel, whether it's email, SMS, the send class or that data use purpose, and then obviously whether they are opted in or opted out, and then having, that contact point of how you're going to reach them there. So this is what we would use to query the automation that's going to feed them into the journey. So if we go to this query, it's pretty basic. Again, we didn't want to go into too much detail, but we'll, for this example, again, we're just querying that date extension that we just reviewed. Be good just to use all subscribers, just to double check. This is with all subscribers being updated on a regular basis from the consent model. It will help you still want to use all subscribers to use as a filter to make sure that they're still active. And there's a relatively straightforward where clause. We want to pull in Sandesh. We want to pull in his record where the channel is email, and obviously when that consent is opted in. And then obviously we want to have that subscriber status be just active. I was using this just for the proof of concept, just to get some records in and all of that. And then in the journey date extension, it could be relatively straightforward for this example. We want to just provide the subscriber key and the email address and maybe that phone number if we're going to be sending an SMS message. So relatively straightforward automation query there. Again, it could be a lot more complex depending on your use case. And then one other execution, I just wanted to mention how you could use this data, this consent data, to drive those different actions within the journey. You could create a variation of this universal date extension, which could be capturing your consent based on a specific channel. So in this example, we're capturing whether Sandesh has opted in or opted out for SMS. And then you could create a custom attribute in Data Designer that would pull in this data so that you can leverage it in Journey Builder, so that when Sandesh enters in the journey, if you're sending a multi-channel communication, both email and SMS, you can use this data to determine when Sandesh is in the journey before you send that email or before you send that SMS message. You can check this data, which is going to be updated in real time, just to make sure that they are opted in. So as we all know, when you enter in a journey, that data becomes stale, and you might want to do that check before you send out that SMS message or even email message. Obviously, all subscribers will help you on that end, but this gives you visibility on how you can use those different channels that aren't, monitored by all subscribers. So just to give you, we did a very basic journey just to show how this would work. And all we wanted to do in this journey was to use a decision split to bring in that logic to determine, which channel we could send that record down. And so we created this decision split to utilize that custom attribute to only send them down to send that SMS message if they've, in that date extension, in that custom attribute. Let me just show you really quickly the configuration on this decision split, utilizing that real-time data that's coming from the consent model to make sure that, while you're in that journey, it's pulling on the most accurate data. So, best practice you want to do is you want to align the subscriber key that is on that custom attribute. So again, I'm just going in here in the contact data. This is, all the different attributes you set up in Marketing Cloud. Here's that data extension that's being updated real time. We're going in here, we're selecting that subscriber key, bringing it over here. And then we want to make sure that we are making that one-to-one link with the subscriber in the journey itself. And then we've covered that in Journey Builder before, just wanted to mention that. And then once we've made that one-to-one relationship, all we have to do is, pull over the consent and make sure that, you know, they've opted in for that SMS communication. And that's, you know, that's a pretty simple execution. I just wanted to illustrate how you can use Journey Builder to not only, and Automation Studio, not only to align to a complex multi-channel, multi-consent model, but also use that data in Journey Builder itself. You know, because as we know, these subscribers can be in journeys for weeks or months, and you need to be able to access that data real time, that consent model data real time, to pull that in and make sure that you're compliant even within those journeys itself. So that's, you know, that level of complexity there. Any questions on how, you know, ultimately see how we could, you know, pull all this data and how we can use this in Journey Builder end to end using that consent model data? Okay, I think that completes the tour in Marketing Cloud. Let me just go back to the slideshow. Yeah, so hopefully that gave you that last bit we covered. We didn't really cover this automation. I think it's relatively straightforward. Again, you're just going to be wanting to query all those different consent objects and populate that table accordingly by the channel, by the classification. And again, that universal data extension is a really simple one that we provided. It can, you know, you're going to want to build that out depending on your use case. You know, depending on that, you could add country, you could add all different types of values there, but it should be a relatively straightforward query on that end. But hopefully that gave you, you know, an idea of two ways of how we're going to incorporate that consent model data in journeys. One, the segmentation, how we're going to determine who should be sent those journeys. Again, it was a simplistic use case on that, but I think it just gives you the model of how we're going to let the consent object data in Salesforce drive who should be entering in those journeys. And then equal as important, once you're in the journeys themselves, leveraging that data to make sure that they're, you know, being fed down the right paths and the right channels once they're in those journeys itself. And I know for some, it does, you know, using automation, that does slow things down a little bit. It's not as real time as you may like, but they have sped up that automation is now every 15 minutes. It's just something for your team to weigh as far as, can you leverage that real time on the Salesforce CRM side? Can you pull upstream all of that functionality into Salesforce CRM and create custom objects that you can utilize so that you can do real-time Salesforce data-fed journeys? Absolutely. It's just something you're going to weigh as far as the 15-minute delay going real time and the tech debt that's going to be required to stand that up and the complexity it might add into your model. Okay, let's talk about just a couple of tips before we wrap up. So dig in on data privacy. Definitely the Privacy Center tool offering that comes from Salesforce is pretty amazing. And it's a Salesforce tool built right into the Salesforce CRM environment, integrated. It's got this amazing preference center capability that you can create your own custom preference centers. You don't even need to build a custom cloud page to do that. But very easy to integrate with Cloud Pages and Marketing Cloud. And the key is that that data is being flowed right into that consent model versus having it go into Marketing Cloud and having to try to find a way to get it back into Salesforce CRM. So dig in there. It's worth exploring. And if you're feeling uncomfortable about data privacy and how you're covering all your bases, start with Privacy Center. I think it's worth it. The consent model. So it's out there, and you don't necessarily have to use Privacy Center to populate it, but it's in Salesforce CRM. Explore it. See what it's like. Try syncing in those different objects into Marketing Cloud and play around with how you might leverage that in Marketing Cloud. Start simple. try, two different channels or just maybe just email at first. And a simple version of the consent model, then add on the complexity once you've got the bases covered. So two databases, how we can use, just on the email side, that all important all subscribers database that we're all familiar with, that we want to leverage and feel like that should be the database of record. Let's let that go. Let's see if we can get that consent model to be the database of record. But I think it was good to hopefully to illustrate that at any point in time, depending on how people are engaging with your emails specifically, all subscribers will be that database of record in that moment of time. But just to make sure that you're using your logic to make sure that you're updating that consent model so that, at the end of the day or within the hour, the consent model is the database of record. Use Journey Builder in other ways than sending emails. Now, we've covered this before, and we didn't really illustrate this in this boot camp using Journey. You could certainly use Journey Builder to update that consent model. But I think the two different ways of thinking about Journey, and other ways of thinking about Journey Builder, not only thinking about Journey Builder in ways of how we're going to enter in those subscribers into the journey itself, but also how you're going to be using that data within the journey. So don't forget about that important part of driving that data, making sure you have that real-time data within the journey to make sure that you're using the most recent consent or preferences throughout those communications. Don't just send them in and set it and forget it, they're good to go. You want to make sure that you're using Journey Builder in that way to make sure you've got that real-time data. And then, it's sort of a little bit old school with Automation Studio, but there's still a lot of value there in using SQL to leverage. I think hopefully we've illustrated using those the different joins and combining all of those different consent objects, especially as it gets more complicated. SQL really is your best bet there. In the Marketing Cloud environment. Obviously, you can use the Salesforce CRM to help simplify that as well. But dig into SQL if if it's not your comfortability area. Start simple, and don't forget about using Automation Studio to use it as a tool when you're trying to build in this consent model, which can be complex. Automation Studio will be your friend there to help get to that path that you need to align that contact, subscriber key, email address, and all of the consent data that's in those other objects. And that was the presentation. Anybody have any questions I can answer on this topic? Any feedback of area of interest that you'd love to learn more about related to Privacy Center, the consent object, how, ways to keep those two databases in sync? Anything resonating there you'd love to learn more about? If not, totally cool.
Good morning, team. This is Monica.
Hi, Monica.
Hey, I was wondering if you can cover multi-BU scenarios or maybe the standard best practice approach for multi-org, multi-BU, scenarios and processes which are already running through the Privacy Center today, and how we can, transform something like that, a simple scenario where we are using the traditional Privacy Center today, and of course, the synchronized data extension and all of that is already there. And if you want to transfer it totally to the Privacy Center using the approach that you are showing, how can we, leverage, or how can we transform that journey?
Great question. I'm so glad you asked. And Monica, just to clarify, a multi-BU scenario, would that be like a multi-country marketing cloud business unit where you might have like United States, a business unit, you might have like say UK as a different business unit, and how you would leverage the CRM to populate that data in both of those business units?
And we have actually North American, but we have separated the BUs based on the service lines that we cater. So for an example, philanthropic will be different business unit, and patients will be different, providers will be different, that kind of stuff.
Yep. No, that's excellent. I mean, depending on your setup, you can, I believe you can pull in those synchronized data extensions, those same data from that CRM environment in both of those business units. So then you could just, leverage that data using using those queries to pull in the appropriate data that you're dependent on for those different audiences. You could also utilize, like the shared data, the shared folders for populate that data. We've had many scenarios with enterprise clients where we're pulling in data into their admin business unit, but we're sharing the data to other business units using those shared data extensions. So you might, if it's a connection from one, Salesforce CRM environment to one business unit, you can still run all that data, pull in that data if there's only one connection to one business unit, but you can write that data to those shared data extensions that the other business units can pull in and leverage that data. So yeah, there's definitely options there. It's either creating a single set of automations to pulling into one business unit and then creating different data sources that would be shared across different business units, or setting up your environment where the same CRM environment can be accessed by all of the different business units, and you're just using different levels of queries to segment that data and leverage it accordingly.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, we've seen it both ways, which is pretty cool. Great question. So question, can we drill down to publication list level and mapping consents at campaign level in both systems? Any special cases to be taken care of? Absolutely. I mean, in this example, we were just updating all subscribers. So if you needed to update different publication lists, you can certainly use that same approach there. There's a lot of flexibility within the model, to handle that. And again, you would, if you're looking to align that with the Salesforce CRM environment, you would just need to identify maybe by that data use purpose could be an example where you might use different types of communication to update different publication lists or data extensions. So just maybe you want to make sure on the you're saying both systems on the on the CRM side, make sure that you're flagging that. Excuse me, and then making sure that that's clear in your automation in Marketing Cloud, that you have the appropriate ways to update either whether it's all subscribers, any other publication list, or data extension. Good question. Okay, I've got to run to a meeting. Thanks everyone for joining. Look forward to the Automation Studio Bootcamp. I think it's going to be starting next week or the week after. Thanks everybody for all your participation and joining all these bootcamp sessions. So sad to see this go away because I love Journey Builder so much. And have a great rest of the day. Thanks everybody. Bye.